Welcome inside the RX Muscle Studios in Westbury for Iron Debate. Long time no see. We certainly haven't done this show in quite some time. It is good to be back. We are back in the thick of the contest schedule. A lot of things to debate, and we will be debating them over the next 45 minutes or so. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. Let's bring in Dave Palumbo to introduce the new sponsor of this show, Quest Nutrition.
Well, yeah, it's my pleasure, actually, and my pleasure because I love the Quest Nutrition products, and I think that's important to understand. You know, we like to take sponsors on here at RX Muscle that we can actually, promote and feel good about promoting. I've always said that Quest Nutrition has the best protein bars that I've ever tasted and that I've ever looked at, nutritionally speaking. And as a matter of fact, on a lot of their ads, they use Dave Palumbo's favorite protein bar. So when Quest, really wanted to come on full time and really support our new TV programming schedule, I was really excited about that because, like I said, I have no problem whatsoever, promoting their products. The also great thing is I'm getting a package in the mail from Quest. They're sending me their new flavor bars. They're sending me the protein powders and some other goodies for us to try on the air. And hopefully we can introduce you guys to the Quest Nutrition line of products. So thanks, guys, for jumping on board and backing what we're doing here, because without the support of the sponsors, we couldn't be giving you the programming that we're giving you.
And before we introduce our two combatants for tonight, Dave, I have to bring this up because it's getting a lot of buzz right now. First of all, great coverage of the New York Pro by yourself, by Johnny Styles, Chris Aceto, as always. Your interview, or rather, should I say, Cedric McMillan's interview of you and Jim Manion, getting a lot of buzz. Seemed like a really fun moment that you had with Cedric McMillan.
Well, Cedric McMillan, I told you, I've said this before, is one of the great personalities of our business. And it's a shame he doesn't get onto more. He doesn't allow me to interview him, or he can interview me more. I told you I wanted to do a TV show called Country Wisdom with Cedric McMillan, and he backed out of this thing. All of a sudden, for some reason, this weekend in New York, maybe because SciTech Nutrition was the sponsor of our coverage, he got wrapped up and wanted to do interviews. He actually interviewed Max Charles. Johnny will be putting that up pretty soon, and that was a pretty good interview, too. And, it's funny because J.M. Manion, he texted me after that and said, "Oh, that was a great interview. My dad, had a great time doing it." And it's not very often that you get the president of the NPC, Jim Manion, on a, I guess you could say, wrap-up video. And the ironic thing is that after what Arnold had said about, Cedric McMillan's, physique and Jim Manion's, being the head judge, I thought it was interesting that we were all together in one interview. And, Jim Manion has been judging longer than anyone, and he's got probably the best insights into the business. And I know Chris Aceto said this. Jim Manion is the best judge out there. And when you get him as the head judge in the judging panel, usually the decisions come out correct.
So now let's introduce our two combatants for tonight. First, the man they call the Technician, who jumped on last minute with us on Thursday night to preview the New York Pro, doing an excellent job as always then and during this weekend. And we now bring in Chris, the Technician Aceto. Chris, how you doing tonight?
How you guys doing?
All right, so we have Chris on board, and bringing him back, he was on the debut episode of Iron Debate, if you remember way back when, the man they called the Diet Coach, Tad Inoue. Tad, how you doing tonight?
Good, great. It's great to be here again.
All right, so we got 4 topics lined up. All 4 topics are going to relate to the New York Pro, and of course, Dave Palumbo on the final word. So let's get right to it. We're going to start with the men's open, the men's open division. Juan Morel coming away with the victory. Many say this was arguably, point-wise and just by the looks, this was one of the closest victories, arguably, in New York Pro history. Chris, what do you say about that?
I mean, I didn't think it was. I think I'm surprised that people say it was a close decision. Because I did have Juan Morel winning, and I texted that to people who work out with Victor as probably the first 1.5 minutes into prejudge. And the reason I had him winning is because I think it's Juan's best, which means he's filled out his frame, which is a really challenging thing to do. And at the same time, if you take another good look at Victor, Victor has got a fabulous body, which can bamboozle you because if you look at the glutes, hams, if you look at real, true muscle definition, he still looked like he needed to come down. And his legs are down still. His legs, while they separate nicely, they're not really full. And to have a crazy package on stage in the lineup, you have to have full legs.
Juan Morel coming in first, Victor Martinez second, Max Charles third. Tad, what did you think about Juan Morel coming out on top and the perception being that this was arguably one of the closest results in New York pro history?
Well, I sitting there in the front row, and I definitely thought it was an extremely close battle between the two of them. And in my mind, it really could have went either way. I'll be honest, I was rooting for Juan because I like the conditioning. It's hard to get past Victor. He has a lot. He did look a bit thicker in some areas, but my biggest criticism for Victor was I did think that he could have been a couple of weeks. He could have been tighter. His backside not as tight as Juan's. Juan was in incredible shape, and I was glad to see that Juan actually, like Chris said, filled out, looked full. He kind of has this tendency to fade fast, and he was starting to fade a bit, like he would deflate real quickly. I know it's his metabolism. I know this guy's got to constantly eat, so it happens quickly for him, and you could see it. You could literally see it on stage, and I could see it. So it's really kind of a timing issue. They were really working him hard, so and it was literally that close. I mean, and there was one other factor I thought was really, really in Victor's favor, which was Victor looked so much more confident on stage. He looked like he knew he was going to win. And you need to have that kind of confidence when you get up on stage at this level when it's really tight and close, especially because both these guys are well liked by the judges, and both these guys are standing and they're going neck and neck, and they didn't even put anybody else in there with them. I mean, they didn't even, at the prejudge, they just had them both out there. So it was really, really, really that close. So I think you could argue, there could have been easy arguments on either side if Victor could have won, but as it stands, Juan came out the winner. I don't have a big issue with that. I thought that he well deserved, especially after last year, because I really would have liked to have seen him win last year, although not against Big Ramy. He got out-muscled, but this year he actually looked bigger. He looked much improved, fuller, and in much better shape. But I would really like to see. It's hard for me to. One of the other things that I saw with Victor, he looked like his shoulders didn't have the same fullness as he has had in the past. So I don't think his body is quite where he was maybe 6 or so years ago when he was really starting to make moves in the sport as he could have been. And I think he's maybe, some of his age might be catching up with him. I don't know. Whatever the case is, it's the best I've seen him look in a few years, but not the best he could be. So
let's go to Dave Palumbo for the final word. Dave, what did you make of Juan Morel edging out Victor Martinez for the open win?
Well, Jim Mannion said it best. He said that, this was the first time. Usually now the way they score the pro bodybuilding is 50% is a prejudging score, 50% at the night show comparisons. They actually scored the pose down, which they never do. They scored the pose down because it was that close, and they had to really, decide who was the best. Here's the way I saw it. At prejudging, I actually had Victor edging out Juan a little bit because I felt that his presentation was better, and that he won and stole some poses from Juan that he shouldn't have just because of his presentation, specifically the side tricep and the side chest. Now, had Juan executed his poses properly, it would have been a blowout, I think, to be honest with you, because I think Juan's physique was better. Jim Mannion said it best when I asked him why did Juan win. He said conditioning. And that's what it comes down to. Chris and I and Tad have said this over and over and over again. Conditioning wins shows. And Juan did this homework. He came in not only conditioned, but with more muscle than he's had in the past. I said this on the radio. I said this to Chris before. Been telling Juan the last couple of years, because I worked with him from before he turned pro. I said, Juan, one day you're going to fill out this frame and no one will beat you. The door will be closed. And I know he didn't want to hear it at the time because it wasn't that day that I was telling him that he was closing the door. And he finished second a few times and third in a couple shows. But on Saturday night, he closed the door. He had enough muscle mass on that huge frame of his to just slam the door on Victor Martinez, a guy who arguably should have been Mr. Olympia and who won an Arnold Classic. So that's a tremendous feather in his cap. On Victor's behalf, Victor came in off, okay? You can't leave the door open like that when you get up against a competitor like Juan Morel. You know, if Victor had come in 100% like Chris, conditioned him for 2003 Night of Champions, I don't think that Juan would have beat him. Even though Juan would have been bigger, I think Victor's shape and structure would have outclassed Juan's. Maybe I don't know if Johnny has a picture of that he could put up, but Victor in 2003 was mind-boggling.
Well, Dave, let's get a quick thought on Max Charles coming in third. Max was featured regularly on Muscle in the Morning, and obviously he had quite the build-up to the New York Pros. You got to look on the screen.
That's the picture. Yeah, it's a little blurry, but you could just see so much detail in Victor there.
But what did you make of?
There it is.
There's a much better picture. Yeah. Oh wow.
Look at the difference.
That's
I know Chris
insane.
can't. I know Chris can't see it, but Chris knows what he looks like.
I can remember it though. So.
Crazy.
But Dave, let's get a quick word from you on Max Charles coming in third.
Max Charles, I said it even in the wrap-up with Cedric. Max Charles has got maybe the best upper body in all of bodybuilding. His upper body might be better than Phil Heath's, and that's saying a lot. The problem with Max is his legs, and Cedric made an interesting point. Cedric has his own what I call Cedricisms, and he said that Max's problem is that he's quote hashtagged, and I said, what the hell is that? Meaning that when you see Cedric, you think hashtag legs or hashtag lack of legs, and that's the automatic thing you go to as soon as you see this guy on stage. Now, did his legs come up from last year? They actually did, but his upper body did too. So proportionally, his legs still look small. And I think from behind, I know that Max did a crazy pizza, Burger King carb up to fill his body out, which looked great, but I thought his glutes were a little watery from behind. I don't know, something's not working exactly right there. But third place against those guys, those guys aren't there. Max wins the show. So Max is right there knocking on the door. He's definitely getting better every single show that we see him at. And, I don't know if he'll ever get his legs to be where they need to be, but I think he can get them good enough where he can win a pro show.
You're watching Iron Debate on rxmuscle.com. If you have questions, you can tweet them using hashtag HMTV, or if you're watching on livestream.com, you can use the live chat box. Moving on now to our next topic, women's physique division. Michelle Cummings coming in first, Gloria Falls in second, and Jennifer Hernandez coming in third. But Michelle Cummings, in her previous, in her amateur era, finishing first at the NPC Championships in the bodybuilding division. And the topic of conversation coming out of the New York Pros, especially when it came to the women's physique division, was that the field, they look bigger. And that brought up the question as to whether or not that is the direction in which this division is trending. So, Tad, we're going to start with you. You assess Michelle Cummings and the rest of the field. Did this signal more of a direction that this division is getting bigger?
I don't know. I wouldn't call this a signal. I think that personally, I think the women's physique division, that the size of the legs of the New York Pro is good. I think that fits squarely into the excitement level that a lot of the ladies who are actively competing in this division, that's the look that they like. They can no longer.
Tad, you can't. Yeah, Tad, keep going. We're just showing right now Michelle Cummings. Her stage performance from this past weekend. Please proceed.
Yes. So, I think that her size and her level of muscularity is really good for the sport, is really good for this division. I don't know if any much bigger, but especially because women's bodybuilding is sort of is slowly eroding, evaporating away, and there's not a whole lot there left for them. So this presents a really nice feminine yet still muscular and muscular enough to be exciting for those women who like more muscularity, who like more definition. So I don't think that this is necessarily something that they're trying to train these particular physiques that happen to be at the top at the New York Pro, like Michelle Cummings and like Gloria Falls and Jennifer Hernandez is a little different because she's taller, but those are the top three. They just tended to be the best ones of that. There were several others there that were really, really good, but But I think that they just happened to be the best that day. They just happened to be a little bit more muscular looking than at other shows. But you go to some other shows, and I've seen other ladies look even bigger. And they draw the spine line. Some of these Brazilian ladies who come in, they're just really, they can be really quite muscular looking. Maybe not necessarily big, but they look muscular. And so I think that this is a good direction. I don't know if we need to go too much farther. I really wouldn't want it to go too much farther, because then I think it would distort women's physique. But I think it's perfect where it is. And once you get too exaggerated, then it borderlines on bodybuilding, with the old women's bodybuilding, and then of course facial features change and it doesn't look as good. So I think it's perfect where it is.
Chris, what did you make of Michelle Cummings and the physique field at the New York Pro? Was it too big for your taste?
The field for me was a disaster. I mean, it's if you look at the trajectory, if Johnny had put up tonight a side by side of 10 of the competitors in this show and 10 who are in a women's physique competition the first or second year, it's not night and day. It's like Mars and Earth. I can't think of a bigger contrast. And the next step is back to female bodybuilding, and the majority of this field is beyond pushing the envelope of what they should be doing. And in 2 years, if this continues, you were just gonna like yawn and say it's female bodybuilding. I can't believe that anyone could. Everyone looks like a female bodybuilder in this lineup. I mean, almost every person looks like a female bodybuilder. If that's what women's physique is, then I guess that's what it is. And I'm out of touch. But to get the edge right now in women's physique, it's not extra cardio, it's not extra whey protein, it's extra something else. If someone wants to dispute that, come back in 2 years at the show and we'll see.
Tad, let's go to the next part of this discussion. And you said you were satisfied with what you saw as far as size and proportion, but you made the point as far as women's bodybuilding is sort of falling by the wayside or really on a decline. Do you see future competitors shaping themselves in a mold which is, again, with the direction that we were talking about, the bigger direction? What kind of a precedent is this setting for future physique competitors?
Well, I mean, I think there's still a standard that you have to still have a certain degree of femininity, and that's the feature I think in women's bodybuilding that has really contributed to that sport eroding away. And so if women's physique loses that component, then yes, then it could slowly start to erode the competitor base. But right now, the competitor base is very strong. The women like this look, as long as you can still have the certain degree of femininity. So I don't think it's producing anything bad for the sport in terms of women's physique. Growing it, because it seems to be growing, especially with the popularity of physique competitors like Dana Lynn Bailey, who really a lot of women look up to in the sport, really want to emulate. And she's not really overly big. She's very small when you walk up on her. She's very small. Most of these ladies really are. But when they're on stage, they can look a bit exaggerated, especially now they're getting really lean. Some tend to want to get this really ultra lean look, and that's the part that's up to the judges. They still have to judge based on what they think looks the best. And so sometimes that criteria gets a little hazy because maybe they don't want the women to be quite as big, but yet the one who is a little bit bigger tends to just look the best anyways. So they have to give it to her, because at the end of the day, it's still a judgment call based on who fits this criteria the best. And sometimes it means that they might be disproportionate a little bit, but they still look the best.
I want to get Chris back in this, Chris, because you didn't like what you saw out of the physique field this past weekend in the New York Pro. What does this mean for future physique competitors? What kind of a precedent is this setting in your eyes?
I mean, if you take the running average of the look, look, there's a lot of girls in the show who are just with a lot of muscle, with a lot of, not leanness. I disagree with the word that Tad used, leanness. I use ripped to shredness.
There were a few.
And there were a lot. And so to improve upon that, you go to the next level. I mean, it's as simple as that. That's how everything spirals out of control. I mean, yeah, you still have Juliana Malacarni and Dana Lynn Bailey, but putting them aside, this was a woman's physique pro show with a level of muscularity that was tenfold different than 2 years ago. Not a little bit more, not like, kind of sort of more muscular. If that's what the women want to accomplish, that's their right, but, where it takes the sport, we got, guts and gyno and no condition now in the men's bodybuilding. And the next progression is you're chasing that condition. And when you start chasing condition, you start implementing into your quote training program things that change the way you look. And we have female bodybuilding again.
Let's get Dave in on this again. Dave, the conversation is about what we saw out of the women's physique division at the New York Pro. Michelle Cummings, back a few years ago, winning the bodybuilding division at the NPC Championships. And again, the talk has been whether or not physique division is going the way of bodybuilding. What did you make of it?
Well, let me start off by saying I love the women bodybuilding physiques. I always liked it. I felt like it was something cool. So I did. Did I like the physiques at New York Pro? Yes, but once again, it's out of control. They're letting it. They're gonna have to reboot it again. They got to move backwards. I remember Chris and I sitting in the audience doing play-by-play at women's physique shows, and we're like, "Oh, she's too big. She's too hard." And then when they made the call-outs, those girls would be like in the second or third call-out, and they purposely marked those girls down. Now it's like they're getting rewarded. So what does that mean? That sends the message out to all the girls. And I know because I train a lot of these women's physique competitors, and they're like, I got to get bigger now. I got to get bigger. And that's going to ruin the sport. And you know what? These girls come up to me and ask me what to do. I say, don't do anything. Don't get bigger, because you know what? The judges are going to have to look, and they're going to have to say, look, we got to cut this back. And then all the girls that got huge are out of luck, basically. Ayana Carroll won the Orlando Pro last weekend, and she had to finish. She finished fourth here. I would have had her probably first or second. I would have had Tammy Marie first or second here. These are girls that were winning pro shows last year and this year, and now all of a sudden they can't place top three. That's something wrong with that. I also liked Heather Grace's physique, and Heather came up to me backstage and said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Nothing." I said, "Don't get bigger. You're perfect." And while I can appreciate Michelle Cummings' physique, and I can appreciate Gloria Falls' is amazing, muscular development she made over this last year. I think she gained 10 pounds from last year. I just think it's too much. And I think that this is sending the wrong message, and it's going to cause it. That's Tammy Marie up there. I mean, that to me should have been the winner, or at least, top two. And she didn't place top three at this show. So, and she gained 10 pounds from last year. So, it's setting the wrong precedent. It's going to get out of control. The girls are going to be forced to use more drugs. They're going to masculinate their faces again. They're not going to be marketable. And you know what? Aside from Juliana Malacarni having a contract, no other women's physique athletes have big endorsement contracts. And you know why? Because the supplement companies know they're not marketable. They're not marketable. And that's a problem. Look at Ayana Carroll. I mean, that's a beautiful looking physique. That should be that and Juliana and Dana should be the standards for the class. Small waist, nice shape, good conditioning, but not ridiculous conditioning. And that's where it should stay, and it shouldn't go beyond that.
We're going to step aside. When we return, we're going to talk about the figure division. We talk about conditioning, whether or not the figure competitors came in too conditioned. That and India Paulino and the bikini division. Where is the bikini division heading? A lot of people are asking that question after this weekend's New York Pro. That and a whole lot more, and of course your questions. So again, if you want to get your questions in, you can tweet using hashtag HMTV or use the live chat box on livestream.com. We'll be back on rxmuscle.com.
IFBB Pro Akeem Williams, what species are you?
We got a nice little care package from Quest Nutrition.
There better be some apple pie in this. I'm taking apple pie at all of them.
All right, what up? It's Gilbert Melendez, chilling with my Quest bar here. First and foremost, most importantly, they're delicious. But it's good to have a good protein bar before training. Gluten-free, you gotta love it. And it tastes good, and it feels like it's doing the trick. I listen to my body, and it says yes to this, so give it a shot.
They taste great. They're awesome. They allow me to feel like I have a little treat while I'm still eating real strict for my training camp and everything. So I'm super excited. Off the top of my head, I have to say the cinnamon roll, the apple pie, and probably the lemon. But I haven't had one yet that I don't like.
This is IFBB Figure Pro Heather Dees, and you are watching RX Television.
Welcome back inside the RX Muscle Studios in Westbury, New York. Iron Debate with Species Nutrition and our newest sponsor, Quest Nutrition. Glad to have them aboard and glad to have you aboard on rxmuscle.com. A reminder, Ask Dave. An all-new episode tomorrow at 4 p.m. right here on rxmuscle.com. If you want to start getting your questions in, go right ahead. Tweet using hashtag AskDave. We have about 35 questions from the last episode, but we will try to motor right through them. So again, Ask Dave tomorrow at 4 p.m. right here on rxmuscle.com. Moving on now to the figure division. Latoria Watts, who won, of course, the 2014 Tampa Pro, did well at the Olympia. She comes in number 1 at the New York Pro. Allison Fraun and Andrea Cantone coming in 2nd and 3rd. For physique, we talked about whether or not the competitors were getting too big, whether it was going the way of the bodybuilding division. Well, for figure, the topic of conversation after this weekend is whether the level of conditioning for the athletes was too much. So, Tad, we're going to start with you on that. When you assess the figure division, did you get the sense that the competitors came in over-conditioned?
Well, some always do, and some don't. In this particular, I think overall, I think that there were a few competitors I thought did. I thought that. And some of I'll tell you what I tell competitors, and because I couch this way, it's different for every competitor. Some competitors have to come in a little bit sharper and a little bit leaner and a little bit harder to look their best. That's just the look that's going to be most receptive to the judges for them. And some can't. They look better when they come in softer, a little bit softer, but yet still lean. Of course, I think Latoria Watts. Definitely, easily, in my opinion, was the best athlete there, and she has a lot of very genetic gifts that just allow her to be able to rise above so many other athletes without having to have this really hard and very, very, very overly done look. But she does have quite a bit of muscle for figure, and that would be the only thing that I sort of criticism that I would have for her is she's quite muscular. She could easily go and do physique or, in these other, if she really wanted to, she'd probably have to fill out a couple small places, but she fits perfectly, I think, into this figure camp. But I would say that, and I mean, there were a few athletes that did come in a little bit, like Alison Fran. I love her to death, and I think she's a wonderful competitor, but she's probably a little bit on the hard side, and she's got to come in harder and got to come in leaner, I should say, to look her best. And so, and she won at the Pittsburgh show the week prior. It worked for her there, but then the game got upped a little bit because Latoria Watts came in, and she has a genetically much better physique than the other ladies that she was competing with at Pittsburgh, and so she took second here. And it wasn't even really that close in my mind. I thought that Latoria Watts was a clear winner. So, and she wasn't as hard, and she wasn't nearly as conditioned. Allison was easily the best conditioned, or the most conditioned figure athlete in the show. But it actually looks good on her. So would I change anything? Would I tell her to change anything? I'd say maybe soften it up a little bit. She doesn't have to be quite so hard looking. Her muscles quite so hard looking. But there's always some that come in harder. I don't really like that look for figure. I think it steps over the bounds, and then they start looking like physique competitors.
Chris,
the conditioning levels and things like that. So, and I think that I do think that some can be a little bit harder, and it can work well for them at shows because they just look better than the other athletes do. But is it the standard that every competitor should shoot for? No. The standard that every competitor should shoot for is not a standard. It's a standard for themselves.
Chris, let's get you in on this. Again, we're talking about the figure division. Latoria Watts coming away #1, and the topic of discussion, again, is whether or not there was too much conditioning among the competitors in the figure field. What did you make of that?
No, I don't think there was too much condition. I like the way the figure girls look. So, my gut answer is no. I don't think there's too much condition. I think you're seeing a little bit more cap delts and a little bit more muscle added to the body, which I'm fine with. And there's a difference between adding muscle like a figure's adding to the physique and just like going for broke like the women's physique are doing. I don't think anyone really in the lineup is in danger of going over the edge. Whereas, I'm sure many of the competitors in the women's physique don't think they're going over the edge, but you know what? Come back in 2 years and you'll get a cumulative effect where it's too late. So I'm totally fine with women's figure. I like women's figure. After seeing women's physique, which I loved to death up until this show, I'm starting to like figure more. Maybe so that probably means the figure are getting more quote muscular, but it's all in the right. As far as I'm concerned, it's all in the right places.
Chris, what did you make in particular of Latoria Watts?
She's probably, the first time I ever saw her, I thought she was fantastic and fabulous, and it's unbelievable what she's done with her physique. She's really, improved it a lot. She's leaned down a lot. She used to be a little bit bottom heavy, I think. For me, she's like Miss Olympia. She's got the Linda Murray, pat, 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 pat to all the body parts. And, a layperson could sit in the audience and say, wow, look at her body the minute she walks out. And that's what a champion in this sport, in any sport, in any men's bodybuilding, women's physique, figure, that's what they got to have is, when everyone can recognize them as the champion. Someone could be never been to a bodybuilding show before. Kai Green could go out and people would, the lay person would say, wow, this guy's a freak. And then Phil Heath would come out and they'd probably see a difference, And I think that's what Watts has more than everyone else is she's just genetically, she's just put together really, really well. And, she has to be a favorite to win the Miss Olympia.
Dave, let's get you in on this.
The funny thing is I was sitting here talking to Latoria Watts for a couple of hours after the show, after we ate dinner and stuff, and she doesn't. And I was giving her these compliments about her physique and telling her what I saw. I remember when she won the USA, she's got a pro card, and all, it was very easy. And it was kind of funny because she has this surprised look on her face, like, really, I don't need to work on anything. I said, well, I wouldn't say that, but but she just had. I don't know. It's kind of funny how some of these competitors with these really fantastic genetics don't always see themselves the same way, or don't always see how good they really, really are. I said, I think she saw this competition a bit closer probably than Dave was. But I do have to say this one thing. that in the figure class, there was one competitor that I really, really liked that still has a little bit of work to do, but I think was, for me, the noticeable competitor. Her name, and it was Vivian Ola from Hungary. Do you remember her?
She was
I think
good.
she.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's just such a cute little competitor. I wanted to like put her in a box and like wrap her up in like a present. I mean, like that. She has a really nice look, and I think that we'll see a lot of her. I think, what did she get? I don't think she placed as well as she probably had hoped. She got like 11th, I think.
Yeah, 11th.
I think 11th. But she was just. She's short, so she's diminutive, but she has this really, 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 really great athletic physique. She just needs to downsize her legs a little bit, get a little bit more conditioned, and she'd be wonderful. I mean, I think she'd be winning shows or pretty close to it.
Dave, let's get you in on this again. The conversation is about the figure division, whether or not we saw too much conditioning this past weekend.
Well, I'll give you a good example. If you would take this figure lineup in New York and you would teach them how to pose for women's physique, and you'd put them up against the first year's women's physique lineups that we saw, maybe even the Olympia, you would probably have the figure girls beating the women's physique girls. What does that mean? It means that the women's figure girls have gotten bigger, they're harder, and because they've evolved to that point, women's physique now has evolved to a bigger point. Is it good? I don't know. I like the figure look, and I think, like Chris said, I think I like it because it reminds me of the women's physique look now. I'm a conditioning buff. I like to see the girl shredded. I always believed in my mind, get the competitor as hard as possible. I had to change that thinking when the judges, were really stringent in saying the figure girls shouldn't be too hard, the women's physique girls shouldn't be too hard or too big. And so I had to almost detrain my brain. So when I worked with athletes, I wouldn't get them too hard, or I wouldn't get them too big, or whatever the criteria was for the class. Now it's like all that's out the window. It's back to shredded and as big as possible. And I don't know. It is what it is. Steve Wennerstrom, the women's historian, would say that's the sport evolving. But what happens in the women's sport is when they evolve too much, they go the way of the cuckoo bird, meaning they become extinct, like women's bodybuilding is being. So I think we have to be very careful not to cross the line. I don't think we've crossed it yet in figure, but we're close.
Dave, what did you make of Latoria Watts this past weekend, finishing number 1?
I told her after she won the USA she's going to be Miss Olympia. That's why, Species Nutrition originally signed her. I think that, she should have won the Olympia, or at least been second this past year. I would have had her winning the Arnold Classic this past year. I think that, the judges are letting her work her way into it, and I think people are getting more comfortable with her physique because, when you first look at her, you think she's huge. But she's not huge. The reason she looks so big is because her waist is so tiny, and it's the illusion it's creating. It's casting. She's not big. She's just structurally amazing, and I think Nicole Wilkins should be very scared of Latoria Watts because she's a serious threat to her throne. To be honest with you, I'm a big Candice Keene, fan. I think that Latoria Watts is surpassed her, and I think Candice is like an afterthought in the rearview mirror of Latoria Watts at this point. I think it's really Nicole Wilkins versus Latoria Watts for the Olympia. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
You're watching Iron Debate on RxMuscle.com. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. Reminder, Ask Dave returns tomorrow here on RxMuscle.com at 4 p.m. We go on to our final topic. Again, if you want to chime in with your questions, we're going to be taking questions after this topic of debate. You can tweet your questions using hashtag HMTV, or if you're watching on livestream.com, you can use the live chat box below. Bikini, India Paulino coming in number 1, Stephanie Maho and Courtney King rounding out the top 3. The conversation about India Paulino in general has been this, that she looked out of the top competitors, she looked small and really, in a sense, the least muscular. And many start to wonder, again, is this the direction that the bikini division is heading in, or if there is a direction at all? What is the judging criteria for the bikini division? Chris, let's start with you on this one.
I have no idea, dude. Honestly, I have no idea. And, it's when I hear the word bikini and muscular in the same, holy shit, dude. I mean, muscular and can we make one distinction where we get, strided glutes and uncritical of some body fat on the ass out of the equation. I just, it's a bikini contest. It's like, make it, what they should do? Make it like the suntan lotion bikini contest they used to have, where you don't really need to look like you eat 75 carbs a day and do 2 hours of cardio to have a bikini body. So what is the criteria? What's the criteria? I mean, every single bikini competition's won by a different person anyway. So there's no, template for what you have to look like, right?
Tad, what did you make of India Paulino coming in first, and what did you make of the judging criteria, if there was one, this past weekend?
Oh, well, there's definitely judging criteria. But again, these things are, like I said before, all judging criteria for all the divisions is there's a set criteria, but it's up to the judge's discretion to use their own subjectivity to interpret it in the way that they see best fit.
Jesus, I need a thesaurus and a translator to figure that one out.
Well, I mean, that's the truth. That's the way it goes. It's the nature of being a judge.
I know, but it's so.
It's not like we got pegs that we're sticking.
I want like third grade, like ninth grade high school guy wants to know. Wants to go to a bikini contest. Who's the winner here?
Well, I think I want to know who even, like you mentioned, who would even make a comment like she was the smallest or being as big.
I mean, to me, you know what? Honestly, to me, I know nothing about bikini. I'm looking at the picture. She looks killer in a bikini. You know what I mean? She's like not lean. She's lean enough. She's not out of shape by any means. She looks cute. Her body looks great, and she looks beautiful. And it's a bikini competition.
For this sport, it's still a physique show, so they still have to have a certain degree of athleticism, a certain degree of a certain kind of physique, and they have to have a certain degree of muscle so that they look healthy, but not overly muscular. So, because when the ladies get lean, sub 10% or anywhere around that or thereabouts, they lose a lot of feminine qualities. So, in order to retain those, you're going to have to put a little bit of muscle on to be able to keep the woman looking not so Auschwitz victim looking, because the women get kind of slender. So there's a certain degree of muscle that has to be involved, but not a lot. I mean, like Courtney King was actually smaller than India.
Tad, why did you think India won? India Paulino came away with the victory.
She came out and she was the clear-cut winner for me. It was
what criteria are you judging that on?
Clear-cut winner. I mean, she had the best presence. Her physique was tight. It was balanced
her physique tighter than anyone else's?
It was more complete. So you look at, take for instance Courtney King. Look at her. Like I said, take for instance Courtney King. It's she's got a very youthful physique, but her waist is a little wider. Look at her. Look at her arms. Her arms, her triceps aren't balanced with her biceps, so she has this very unbalanced look on certain angles. So, I mean, we're talking about cutting hairs here. It's not like these are bad competitors by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that when you look at the whole complete thing, and I'm going to tell you, like when you're a judge and you're sitting there, imagine myself as a judge sitting there, looking, at these competitors coming out. India comes out and she just commands the stage. She has a really great stage presence, and she doesn't have a lot of flaws in her physique. Yes, she's diminutive, but she doesn't have a lot of flaws in her physique when it comes to the sport. So I had her, and she wasn't overly lean. She wasn't overly muscular. So she was right there, I think, with the judges.
Hold on a second. Chris, you have shades on.
Because I wanted earmuffs and I didn't have them. So,
Dave, let's go over to you again. The topic of conversation. Okay, go on.
It's just I struggle to, Here's my problem.
Don't struggle, Chris.
I struggle to mesh together bikini, like hot body with an ass and tits with sports. And then at the same time saying, well, her ass was a little too jiggly, or her condition wasn't that good. It's like, I don't know, just bikini. When I think of bikini, I think of, is it Raquel Welch, Johnny? I think she's Spanish, right? Wasn't right?
Yeah.
She had the best bikini body, and the people today would. So
That's a
it's just still odd to like use like women's physique and figure and criteria. We come from bodybuilding, so when we look at bikini bodies, I think we get it all screwed up anyway.
All right, Dave, I want to go to you because we just saw something on the screen right now. We just saw a compilation of the different bikini competitors, and we saw someone that we had here on Heavy Muscle TV last week, Yarishna Ayala. And what is the difference between her coming in last and India Paulino coming in first? What did you make of the criteria?
Look, I think the criteria is India Paulino's super hot, and that's about it. But there's no criteria because you know what? I look at Lorena Buccio, who Johnny just had up on the screen, and I'm like, from a physique perspective, I'm like, what's wrong with her? She's in great shape. I loved her physique. There she is up on stage. I mean, you might say maybe she's too muscular. I don't know, but I thought she was great. And then if you don't want someone who's too hard, I'm talking about Lorena Buccio. You look at Yarishna Ayala from Puerto Rico, and she's certainly not too hard. I mean, I would have liked to see her a little tighter, but I mean, she's certainly gorgeous, and she's got a bikini body to die for. So, to me, it's tough. And I think what happens is the judges get into a quandary where they're comfortable with a certain number of competitors that have done well before, and they always go back to those competitors. And it's easy to do that in bikini because you can justify anything. In bodybuilding, if someone who hasn't placed in a while comes in out of their mind conditioned and looks great, they'll move up because the judges can quantify that. But because you can't quantify bikini because everyone looks really good usually, I think what happens is the same girls keep doing well, and the ones that are not in the mix have trouble breaking into that mix. And once again, I don't even have a solution to the problem. It's just, it is what it is,
So that's going to conclude the debate portion of the show. We're now going to go to your questions. And the first question, Dave, this one relates to the 212 division, and a man we spoke about, or we lightly touched on last week's Heavy Muscle TV, where you and Chris Aceto were previewing the 212 division. The name Kim Jun-ho came up. Well, Kim Jun-ho comes in second. Guy Cisternino comes in first. Marco Rivera finishes third. We'll go around the horn. Dave, you first. What did you make of the 212 division?
Well, I thought that Guy was amazing. Obviously, he was the clear-cut winner. But this Kim Jun-ho, I said it last week as a joke, this guy better look really good coming all the way from Seoul, Korea. And you know what? He didn't disappoint anyone. There were people in the audience that thought he should have won. I think the reason he didn't beat Guy is because he just was not as big as Guy, and Guy had the same level of conditioning. But this guy's got a terrific physique. He's got a great future. He needs to pack on a little bit more size. To me, he looks like a young Hide Yamagishi. And I think that he's got a bright future in the division if he continues to make improvements.
Tad, what did you make of the 212 division?
Obviously I'm always excited about the 212 division. I liked I was, man, as soon as Kim walked down on stage, I was impressed. Remember, I tweeted out a clip of his video because I was so impressed with him, and I thought he was a little closer than probably Dave thought to Guy, but I did think the Guy definitely won. I thought that Marco got a little bit of a gift. I thought he wasn't as good a shape. I thought the guy that got ignored was Sean Clarita. I think that guy looked phenomenal, even though he was a smaller guy. I thought that he should have moved up a little bit more. The guy was hard everywhere. He was complete. Put 15 pounds of muscle on this guy. He's our next giant killer. I mean, the guy's really, really that good in my opinion.
Chris, what did you make of Kim Jun-ho coming in second, Guy Cisternino in first in the 212 division overall?
I mean, I agree with Dave. I thought Kim looked outstanding, spectacular. And I thought Guy was just too, this Guy had a brutal look to him, which means that, it's the thickest guy we've seen, and his condition was really, really good. And it just, at the end of the day, he's just too much for Kim. I mean, had Kim had a few more pounds of muscle, or Guy had less muscle, then I think we're, the results could have been different. That said, I thought Kim looked outstanding. The guys who got third and fourth to me were fat, and which is surprising because the 212 guys are usually just outstandingly peeled. Chris Tuttle, I thought, should have placed higher, and Sean Clarita should have placed higher. Sean Clarita looks like he weighs like 120, and that's not a negative. It's not a negative, it's a compliment, because although he looks like he weighs 120, he stood next to Guy in the lineup, and he just looked like he was small, but not, he looks like he deserved to be in a first call out of 6. And I would have easily had him. I mean, to me, he represents 212 bodybuilding more than the 3rd and 4th place. I mean, they were just like soft to me. And as you know, the litmus test are these 212 guys, because they have to make a weight class. It's understood that you better be really, really hard, or you're not going to get a look. So the guys who I thought were overlooked were Tuttle and Clarita, the guys who Christmas came a little bit early to were the 2 guys who got 3rd and 4th.
Mark Arnold. Yeah, I don't understand how even Jose Raul Sanchez Riaz, let's say that 10 times fast, how he even made the top 5. Because I didn't think he should even have been in the top 5. I thought it should maybe 6.
Suspicious lumps in his shoulder too that I really wasn't.
He had suspicious lumps. He had suspicious adipose tissue.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. But Chris Tuttle looked really good. I couldn't figure out why they placed him a little
solidly 3rd.
Yeah, that's what I would have had too. I thought when Marco first came out, actually, I was really disappointed. I was thinking he was going to look better. He had his water. He looked better at night, I think, but he looked a little watery. He didn't look quite as good. I could see him getting better as he posed. I don't know what happened to his. But he was getting better and better and better. So he kind of recovered a little bit, but not enough in my mind to really be in that third place spot. But the 3rd and 4th place, I was confused too a little bit. But I was really disappointed in Boya Edwards. In Boya, he should have looked better. He should have. He didn't do his homework or something.
Let's go on to the next one. This question is about Victor Martinez, and he wonders whether or not the judges, or rather, if the judges, penalize Victor for not having striated glutes. Dave, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, I mean, I don't know about striated glutes part per se. I think he was penalized just for not being his best. And usually striated glutes will tell you whether a guy's in his best shape or is not his best shape. But when I used to compete, my glutes would get striated before my middle back got in shape. So striated glutes isn't always the answer. But usually, if a guy shows up a little off and it's a tight race, usually the most conditioned guy wins. And I think that's really what happened to Victor.
Well, Chris, let's frame it in this way. Where do you think Victor fell short?
Honestly, it's not his best. You could say that, so that's falling short. I don't think we're going to see his best. Meaning, there's if you consider everything that he's been through, his age. We're not going to see, his best. I don't think, but we are seeing the best of Juan Morel. So I don't really think it's where he fell short. I thought it was a very good showing for him, really. I just thought that Juan, when Juan beats you hard on the most muscular, and Juan, beats you standing relaxed in the lineup from behind, looks like he's doing more like rows and deadlifts and all that, and his legs still look good from behind, he's going to be hard to beat. I just think it's more Juan Morel finally filling out, finally coming into his own, and I think that I don't think you can read into it any more than that, or need to read into it any more than that. It's a younger bodybuilder who's improving versus an older bodybuilder where it's hard to improve.
Tad, what about you? What did you make of Victor Martinez coming up short in 2nd place?
Well, he deserved 2nd place. It was close, but was he penalized for not having striated glutes? a manner of speaking, yeah, he was, because if he had striated glutes, I think he would have probably won. Of course, that also assumes, like Dave said, that the rest of his body would be at the same level too, because his backside not so great, not a lot of stuff popping when he hit his back poses, and his lower spinal erector is not as detailed as Juan's, and so was he penalized for striated glutes? In a manner of speaking, yeah, he was. But like as Dave said, most athletes will be if they're not in complete shape, and you're standing next to a guy who is. So yeah, sure, absolutely.
You know what's really not fair also, Sid? If you look at that picture that Johnny had up there, Victor looks a lot better in that picture than he did in person. That picture makes Victor look like he should have won the show. And when in fact, if you really got a closer look and you were there in person, Juan was way harder than what's being shown.
Yeah,
that's usually the case with pictures. Pictures don't tell the whole story sometimes.
Exactly. I think that some of the comments that I got from people was, and these are of course all people who weren't at the show, and only saw pictures, two-dimensional pictures of static shots, right? And we're sitting there, basically front row, looking at these guys hitting poses, and it's a very, like you said, it's a very different story. And I try to explain to people, like, look, it's different when you're seeing these guys move around in his three dimensions, and you're right there, and you can see everything popping, you can see everything working, you can see muscles and striations moving around, and from the front in a static pose, Victor looks incredible. It looks like it's hard to beat, especially in a front double bicep. And then when Juan Morel hits it, and he still's got to work on some posing issues. Juan does, because we talked about that earlier. But that's not, like you said, that's not the complete story. The complete story is how you have to sit there, you have to be there, and there's nothing like buying a ticket and going there and watching it yourself, and then being able to pass judgment on what the judges are actually making their decisions based on.
Got a couple of good questions here, so I'm going to go around the horn. Let's get a quick thought on each one. The first one: could Cedric have come into the show and won easily? Dave, you first.
I don't know if you could say win easily, but he certainly could have won the show if he was at his best. I think it would have been a nice battle, because him and Juan are very tall. I think they would have matched up well. I think that Cedric would have had his work cut out for him. Juan was really good here, although I think Cedric's his muscles are so much bigger and rounder than these other guys. I think Cedric would have emerged victorious. I think Chris probably would agree with that.
Chris?
Yeah, I going into the show, I would have thought Cedric would have, easily won. But after seeing Juan, I think it would have been a battle, actually. I agree with Dave. I think, we just discussed pictures, for example, of, you have to be there to actually appreciate what you see with the naked eye versus photos. I think what Cedric has, and Dave would probably agree with this, is when you see him in real life, he's really a lot bigger than he looks like in pictures. He just gives you a true 3D look, because his muscles are really round. His back is round, his triceps are really crazy. That said, it probably would have been a battle. It would have been interesting because you have two tall guys. And I think one of the interesting things was Juan is that much taller than Victor, which this is the first time that's helped, because Juan's physique is filled out. Before, I thought it was a detriment. He'd have a lanky look to him. And yet, Cedric is actually taller than Juan. So, I guess we'll have to see in Brazil. That question will be answered in Brazil in a few weeks.
Tad, what about you?
Well, I think that is an interesting question. I think it would have, instead of it being the Juan and Victor Martinez show, it would have been probably the Juan and Cedric McMillan show. But I still think that Juan probably, if Cedric would have come in like he did at the Arnold, then I think he probably still might have lost out, depending on, the one criticism I have, I think Cedric has probably one of the best genetic structures out there for men's bodybuilding. He just doesn't present enough wow factor for me when he gets on stage. He loses his personality when he stands on stage, for me. He needs to animate more. He needs to do something more. I don't know what it is, but he at least he did at the Arnold this year, and I really wanted him to show me some excitement. give me the energy. Dexter did, Branch did. He didn't, and so I think that hurt him, because I think judges and people can feel energy, and they can see that and they can feel that. And even though the physique is there, those physiques are all appreciated. All these judges know these guys, so I think definitely he may have been able to, if he would have showed up at the show like that, he easily could have. I don't think anyone would argue that he could have easily been victorious, because he's definitely, from a structural standpoint, I think he's better than Juan Morel is. But Juan was in great shape, and I haven't seen Cedric really look exactly like that, quite like that, and really want it. Although Cedric looked a little like, I really still think that Cedric looked he lacked a little confidence at certain points in the when they did the post down, and when they were on stage, when he was in the prejudging posing with Victor. So there's a little bit of both, but I think in the end it probably would have still come out. Juan probably still would have won.
All right, so let's go on to the last one. And again, this is a question about someone that we saw a bit of a reprisal from, kind of making his return to the stage, someone that we've featured on Muscle in the Morning for the last couple of weeks, Alex Fedorov. What did the panel make of Alex Fedorov? Tad, I'll start with you.
I'd never seen this guy in person before until the New York Pro. I was really interested to see him, aside from this really interesting pec tear that he's got on the right side, which really kind of, and he's got a weak chest, and it's probably because of that. I don't know if he had to stop training his chest or something, but he's so big. And I heard the Russian contingency that probably followed him here and there. He's such a big, monstrous kind of guy, but he doesn't have a lot more going for him than that, in my opinion. I mean, if he were to really put it together, he might do a lot more damage, but he wasn't in the best condition. He wasn't tight enough. I don't know if it was just, I don't know how long he stayed and prepared, here. He's got a kind of a thick waist, but he's so big, so he kind of makes up for some of that. I was not as impressed as I would have hoped to have been. I've seen pictures, and when you see pictures, I always know that sometimes people are like, they're like Instagram heroes, so to speak. They're like, social media heroes. But when they get him on stage, stand next to other champions, all of a sudden they don't look as good. He doesn't look as good. Not that day, he didn't, for sure. So,
of Alex Fedorov making his return really after quite some time on stage.
He probably needs to come in like leaner and tighter, and I think oddly enough, his muscle's so dense and it's so big that he's probably mistaken when he looks in the mirror, I'm tight enough, which put him under the lights, and you say, I'd still like to see him tighter. So he has a weird body. There's a lot of them, which is good, I guess. He's got a lot of height, a lot of width, colossal legs and arms. The pec tear is pretty noticeable, but maybe if he died it down further, it'd be less noticeable. It's his first show back or second show back since retiring for a decade. So, maybe if he keeps dieting for 8, 10, 12 weeks, he might get better and better as he goes.
Dave, what did you make?
It could be, I think Dave said it best. If he was peeled for this show, they would, you could argue, who knows how high he could have placed, because what are you going to do with him? He's taller than Juan Morel. He's wider than Juan Morel. His legs are bigger than Juan Morel. He's wider. His back's, got more thickness. He's not put together like Juan Morel, but, if he had Juan Morel's condition, where would he have placed? It'd be really high.
Dave, now this is someone who has been on your radar for the last few weeks, just as far as having him featured on Muscle in the Morning. What did you make of Alex Fedorov, seeing him on stage this past weekend?
Well, I kind of felt bad in the sense because I wanted to see him better. I was like, oh, if you only would have dialed it in a little tighter, because I do think with all that mass he's got, and it's put together pretty well. You could make a case that his waist is a little thick, but you know what? Jay Cutler's waist was not that small either, but it looked small because it was so wide. If Fedorov was 6 pounds, 7 pounds lighter, in better shape with crazy striated glutes, that waist wouldn't have looked so big because his taper would have been better. I think he would have been a solid third. And you know what? I still would have had him in that top 5 just because of his muscle mass. He was freaky. And that counts for something. You know, I'm a conditioning guy. His glutes were not soft. They had lines in them. They weren't as deep as I would have liked to see them. You know, especially when you don't have the best structure or the smallest waist, you got to come and peel to the bone. Otherwise, you're just giving up too much. If he would have been peeled to the bone, he would have easily been third, and we would have been saying, well, let's see how he goes. You got to remember, this was the guy who placed third behind Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler at the 2003 Russian Grand Prix, and a lot of people thought he was going to be the heir apparent to the Olympia throne after that. Now, granted, he tore the pec, and he had some problems, and he dropped off the face of the earth, but here's a guy who certainly might have gotten a little overlooked at this show. But once again, I have trouble, you know, saying the judges didn't do a good job when the guy's not in his best shape of his life. So, you know, did he deserve 7th? Maybe not, but it wasn't a terrible placing for him, you know.
Well, that is going to do it for this episode of Iron Debate. We're going to be back next week with an all-new Heavy Muscle TV Tomorrow's Ask Dave. Next Thursday night at 8 p.m., Heavy Muscle TV. Tomorrow, Ask Dave returns on RX Muscle, 4 p.m. You can get your questions in for Dave on the Muscle Central forum on rxmuscle.com, or you can tweet your questions using hashtag AskDave. I'm Sadiq Faruqi. Till next time, have a good night.